Hey, this is Cole McCormick from Firewood Media, and today we are doing a Godzilla tier list ranking of all the feature films. This list does not include Godzilla King of the Monsters from 1956, King Kong vs. Godzilla, the 1963 Americanized version, or Godzilla 1985, as they are American adaptations of the Japanese originals, and they really don't count. We're also not doing Zone Fighter or Singular Point because those are TV shows and they aren't really part of the film series. Godzilla 1954, not really a hot take, but it's one of the best, if not the best film in the franchise. This is the ideal film for any beginner to really watch. It sets the groundwork for the series. Granted, a lot of the films don't really carry the same tone as it later down the line, but that's not really important. It's filmed in black and white, and Godzilla looks very scary in black and white. The way that they filmed at such a low angle made Godzilla look huge, and really this was the start of Suitmation. And while a lot of people laugh at the whole rubber monster idea thing, this is using that to its fullest potential with what they had available at the time. The plot and storyline is very well made, very well told. It's told from the Japanese perspective, and they were hit with the atom bomb, Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. And so this film is really made by the survivors of that specific incident. The wounds were still very fresh, and so for them, this was a way to tell a story that they really hadn't been able to tell. American censors made it illegal for Japanese filmmakers to make movies about World War II. And even if they did, it was very censored, and it wasn't really the story that they wanted to tell. They weren't allowed to make movies about, the atom bomb, within a specific reason. Again, it's very muddled, and I'm not really an expert there. All I know is that this was their way of sort of getting around that and being able to tell a story and express this trauma through a film. And Gojira from 1954 is a fantastic film and a must-watch for really anyone, even if you're not a Godzilla fan, if you disregard the series. In terms of just film history alone, this film is extremely significant. Just make sure that you're watching the one with subtitles and not the one with Raymond Burr. While the one with Raymond Burr is halfway decent, it doesn't really do the story justice, as he's really there as a American insert for white audiences of the time to say, hey, I identify with him. That means I can watch the movie. And it kind of undercuts the whole message of the movie. And I don't know. I just think it's an inferior film. However, if you are interested, give it a watch. Why not? But Gojira from 1954 is the one of the best. So definitely give it a watch. Godzilla Raids Again is D tier. This was very quickly produced. At the time, again, sequels weren't necessarily a thing. This even goes back to King Kong from 1933, how within I think it was 9 months, they pushed out Son of Kong because they didn't think that people would still care about King Kong after the movie came out, Godzilla Raids Again came out a year after Gojira, and it's a mess of a movie. It's most notable for being the introduction of Anguirus, or Angulus, depending on how you say it. I mean, here's the thing, just really quick. There's a lot of different pronunciations of the monsters in the titles. So I'll just say what I'm used to saying. Ghidra or Ghidorah. I like Ghidra more. Anguirus is introduced in this movie as Godzilla's enemy. Of course, that wouldn't really last too long, as they'll be depicted as allies throughout most of the franchise from here on out. Right away, the opening shot of the movie are these stock nuclear explosions going off, and it just makes it feel like a trashy 50s B movie and not really something worth your time or something that's compelling as opposed to Gojira. So yeah, not a really good movie. They sped up a lot of the fight scenes to the point where it looks almost comical. Gojira was filmed with a slower frame rate, so that way it made it look like Godzilla was moving at a slower pace and that he was bigger than he really appeared to be. This movie just speeds it up, so it kind of undercuts that. If there are any positive things to say about it, though, The suit design for Godzilla is really good. The way that they slimmed him down mostly and added the fangs really makes him more intimidating. I actually think it's better than the original, the 1954 suit. So that's a positive. However, again, it's very cheaply made and just not that great of a movie. Again, only really notable for introducing Anguirus. So moving on to the next one. Coming in at B tier is King Kong versus Godzilla from 1962. The reason why this one isn't higher up, I know that for a lot of people this is, a pretty good one. For me growing up, I loved watching this one. However, by today's standards, it doesn't necessarily hold up. I think it's interesting with how they went about this. They had a sort of the equivalents in Japan of Abbott and Costello. I'm not too sure of their names, but the two lead actors in this have fantastic chemistry. And it definitely went for a more comedic approach. And this is where the series starts to slowly diverge into more, I wouldn't say family friendly, but definitely kid-oriented, more lightheartedness. Godzilla isn't really a force of nature anymore. Well, he still kind of is in this one, but this is where he starts to sort of diverge into kind of a hero, not really, because in this one he really isn't a hero. Kong is the hero of the movie. But even then, Kong isn't really depicted as a hero, but it's besides the point. They're both depicted as just monsters. I mean, there's a really cool scene where King Kong climbs the Tokyo Tower, and he's clearly holding a doll, which the special effects in this movie are not the best. This is where they really started to, they're starting to kind of figure out how to key people out. I don't know what specific technology they used for this, but throughout this movie you can see like a blue aura around most of the characters whenever they're in front of a giant monster, and it's very distracting. That being said, though, it is still very entertaining. It's still a well-made movie. There are just some technical flaws, and overall it could have been a lot better than it was. The octopus fight just drags on for way too long, and it could have been a lot better. But at the same time, for what they had at their disposal in terms of technology and budget, it's commendable for sure. And not to mention, this is one of the first versus movies. It's very groundbreaking in that, I guess, perspective. But again, the Godzilla franchise from here on out, pretty much every single movie is going to be a versus movie. Mothra versus Godzilla, I would say, is A tier. I know that this is a fan favorite for a lot of people, and that many would think that it's S tier. However, for me, I've never really liked Mothra. I've always felt that it was just kind of a weak design and just a not so interesting monster overall. This is especially apparent when the larva just kind of spray Godzilla with the webbing caterpillar stuff, and he just falls into the ocean, and it's just kind of a very weak battle. It's interesting what the film has to say about capitalism for sure. How this egg washes up on shore and they immediately try to capitalize on it. But I don't know. The adult Mothra effects just aren't the best, and I'm just not a big fan of this specific iteration of Mothra. We'll get into my favorite later down the line. But for what it's worth, though, the scenes of Godzilla just wrecking the military are awesome. He is truly unstoppable in this film. And honestly, if it was a movie without Mothra and it was just Godzilla just wrecking stuff, I feel like it would have been a lot better. I don't know. I just don't like Mothra. That's just me. It's my opinion. So, yeah. Next movie, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. For me, this is B tier. Again, it's fun. It's schlocky. This is really where the movie starts, or the franchise itself starts to kind of diverge more into that kid-friendly, family-oriented, idea. Godzilla's more of an anti-hero here. This is also really the first movie with aliens, so it starts to kind of veer more into science fiction, which I don't have a problem with. I love sci-fi, especially in my Godzilla movies. But for this movie, it just feels like it's lacking certain elements that would push it up to A tier and to S tier. Regardless, still a very entertaining movie. Invasion of the Astro Monster is A tier. This fixes a lot of the problems that I have with Ghidra the Three-Headed Monster. For starters, there's no Mothra, which is really cool. I love the science fiction element of this movie, especially the beginning, and really anytime that they're on Planet X. It feels like an episode of Star Trek, which is really cool, like the 60s, the original series Star Trek. It's combining Godzilla and Star Trek into something that's really fresh, and honestly, it breathes some fresh air into the series, and I really enjoy this one. Growing up, for me, this was always one that I enjoyed watching. An iconic moment, for sure, that a lot of people know is the scene of Godzilla doing his happy dance after he beats Ghidra. And this is also really cool because it's a battle that's pretty much taking place in space, and you never really see that. I'm pretty sure it's the only battle that has taken place, in outer space, or at least on a planet that isn't Earth. And it's cool to see that. The only reason that this movie is an S tier is because the story itself is just kind of weak. You see a lot of the plot twists coming without ruining anything. I don't want to ruin anything for you, but you see a lot of the plot twists coming without ruining stuff. Don't worry, but it's just a bit predictable and formulaic, and a lot of movies are going to start kind of emulating this. It's so close to perfection, in my opinion, or at least S tier, but it's still a very solid movie. Ebra, Horror of the Deep is D tier. I'm not a big fan of this movie. When I was a kid, I maybe watched this about once or twice. Anytime Godzilla's on an island, I just kind of zone out. I don't care. I prefer to see battles happening in cities, or at least places where there can be a lot of collateral damage. That sort of adds to the tension and just the overall dramatics of it all. And this movie is just kind of bland. It's very clear that this was supposed to be for King Kong, from him, interacting with the girl and the whole lightning thing, which was established in King Kong versus Godzilla. And frankly, it's just not that entertaining of a movie. I just don't like the premise of, these terrorists using a giant crab to prevent people from leaving the island and using people as slave labor. It's too out there for me, and that's saying a lot coming from the Godzilla franchise. It's just dumb. And it's not like corny dumb or cheesy dumb. It's just dumb, and I just don't like this one. Son of Godzilla. Now, this is probably one of the hotter takes that I have, but I'd say that it's average. It's decent. Now, a lot of people rip on this movie mainly for Minya's design, which I get it. He's ugly. It's the son of Godzilla. Ooh, he's derpy. But I still very much enjoy this movie. There's a lot of heart to it, especially at the end when they're embracing in the snow. It's such a heartwarming kind of ending, and I just really enjoy this one. Whether it's nostalgia or not, I don't care. I feel like it's very well made. Kamacuras and Kamanga, or Spiga, depending on how you want to say it, are very intimidating villains. Again, it's not higher up because it's another island movie, but the general heartwarming tone of the film is what elevates it above Ebra. The whole weather-changing subplot just doesn't work for me, and honestly, the main appeal of the movie is Godzilla and Minya's sort of relationship, as well as the perils of the island that they live on. Destroy All Monsters is A tier. The only reason it's not S tier is because it's way too long. If this movie was cut down severely and there was a little bit less human stuff, because the human stuff in here is not that great. In fact, it's pretty bad. If they were to just cut that down and focus mainly on the monsters, I would have no problem with this movie. I'd put it up, on S. That being said, though, the monster battles in this are incredible. The destruction scenes are awesome. Godzilla attacks New York, and Manda's there wrapping itself around, various like trains or metros or whatever it is. It's just a really cool movie, and you could tell that the filmmakers really wanted this to be the end of the Godzilla series. And in my opinion, this would have been a perfect ending. I would have been perfectly okay with this being the series. That way the video can end right now and I can go to bed. That's a joke. It's 7:24 p.m. But I don't know. I think that this is a very well-made movie. It's very well crafted. My only gripes, again, the human stuff, but also I would have liked to have seen more monsters interacting in the final fight. You see a lot of them, like Varen and Baragon, just sort of watching from afar, and it's like, I wish they could have had a scene where maybe when Ghidorah takes to the sky, they have Varen come and, knock him down or something. Like just have them do something. Baragon in this movie was supposed to attack Paris, and then they replaced him with Gorgosaurus, but they left dialogue in saying that it was Baragon, which, I mean, Baragon deserves more respect. It's a really cool monster. So either way, though, I'm kind of rambling. Destroy All Monsters is a very solid movie, but just skip to the monster scenes, honestly. You don't really need to pay attention to any of the human stuff. It's boring. It's another alien invasion subplot, too, which has become a theme, and it's going to continue later on down the line. So, again, it's a good movie, just not great. Godzilla's Revenge, that is S tier. No, it's not. It's really bad. It's really bad. Toho has a problem with, at least during this specific time period, they had a problem with stock footage. They would constantly reuse the same shots. And this carries on a little bit throughout the Showa era, continuing on throughout here with budget cuts. But in this movie, it's very evident that this is the case. At certain points, it feels like a Godzilla clip show and not an actual movie. So much so that there are literally scenes reused in its entirety from Ebra Horror of the Deep and Son of Godzilla and Destroy All Monsters. And the Godzilla suit is constantly changing. If there are any redeeming qualities in this film, because I'm a Godzilla fanboy and I look for this stuff in these horrible movies, and by horrible movies, I mean Godzilla's Revenge and, whatever else we add to F tier. I love everything else that's from, like, C and higher, but, yeah. Just don't take that the wrong way, that comment. Okay. If there's any redeeming quality in this film, it's definitely the way in which it feels dreamlike, in it that the writers took a bunch of LSD and then wrote the movie. It's pretty surreal to have Minya talking to a small boy and then growing to the size of like half of a Godzilla and then fighting a giant ogre. It's bizarre, and that ogre is like shooting electricity out of its hands. It's entertaining to a degree. If you don't watch, like if you haven't seen any other movie, like if you just go from like Gujira to this, it's going to be a trip for sure. But also, it's like if you've seen everything else, it just feels redundant, because it's like I've already seen the battle between Godzilla and Ebra where they're flinging the boulder back and forth, and it's distracting to see the suits constantly changing. I'm going to get off this topic because this movie doesn't deserve that much attention. It was very clearly a cash grab. It's called Godzilla's Revenge, but he doesn't get revenge on anybody. Gabra's a cool monster, though. I will say that. That's the green ogre guy I was talking about. So, this is a huge hot take, I'd say. Godzilla vs. Hedorah is a straight up S tier movie. I would argue that this is probably my favorite film in the franchise, which, again, I know a lot of people are iffy on this movie because it's so weird. On the Godzilla subreddit, I even saw someone ask if this movie's even necessary to watch in a marathon, and I feel like this movie is very much overlooked, and it's underappreciated. Yoshimitsu Banno is the director of this film, and he went batshit nuts in the best way possible to create some of the best avant-garde pieces of cinema I've ever seen. There's a part where Hedorah's flying towards this like construction site thing, and this guy's on this building that's like half built, and he screams and he jumps off, and then the building collapses, but there's no sound. And not to sound like a pretentious dickweed, it's riveting. Like this whole movie is so good. It starts out as almost like a children's movie, right? There's a child in the lead role, which is the same as Godzilla's Revenge. And you're sort of led into this false belief of, oh, yeah, okay, this is for kids. And then you see Hedorah turn people into skeletons, and it's gruesome. And people get sludge on them, and it's like burned, and it's wicked. And I really want someone, preferably me, Toho, please let me make this a remake of this where it's just straight up like body horror, like just go nuts with the sludge and people turning into disgusting sludge monsters and stuff. But this movie, just for me as a kid, and this is likely just a nostalgia thing, it invigorated this sense of creativity that I had like never seen before. It scared me, but it also made me want to be a filmmaker, and this is one of the most important movies I've ever experienced in my life because of this. And it makes me so happy to watch this movie because of all the creative risks that it took. Tomoyuki Tanaka, the producer of Godzilla, saw the movie and basically was like, the franchise has done it. This has killed the franchise, and he banned Yoshimitsu Banno from making any other movies. But damn if this movie isn't really good. I mean, this is one of the most weirdest movies I think I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of movies. Stands above a lot of the Godzilla movies. In fact, if I'm not going to overcomplicate it, but if I would have this be in a tier of its own. It is so good. This movie is a masterpiece, and I'm not even joking here. Watch this movie. Please, it's so good. I keep noticing stuff, too, with this movie. I got the Criterion Blu-ray like last summer, and, the Showa collection. And I watched Godzilla vs. Hedorah for the first time in Blu-ray because I had the same DVD copy since I was like 4. And I watched it in Blu-ray, and there's the scene where they all go up to Mount Fuji, all the hippies, and I never noticed that it was in black and white until watching it in Blu-ray. And then as soon as he hits that guitar chord, it goes into full color. And that's one of the coolest things ever. It's like I keep noticing really neat things every time I watch this movie, and it's truly one of my favorite movies of all time. So do yourself a favor, watch this movie. Oh boy, Godzilla vs. Gigan is rough. I mean, it's really rough, but for me, it's still C tier. It's above Godzilla Raids Again in Ebra for a few reasons. It actually takes place in a city, and there's some damage, like collateral damage and stuff. Kind of controversial, but I do love the gore when Anguirus slams his head into Gigan's blades. It's awesome. I love stuff like that. It's so out of the box, especially when, again, it's supposed to be a kids movie. However, Godzilla and Anguirus talk throughout the movie, and as the movie progresses, their roars get more and more like distorted and just messed up, and I'm not a big fan of that. The Godzilla roar is really sacred in my opinion, and it's just messing with that. I don't like that. It just feels almost sacrilegious. So again, it's a decent movie. Clearly there's some budget problems though. Like, Ghidorah looks really stiff when he's flying, so, is it watchable? Yeah, which is why it's above, all the other ones, and, I still do enjoy it. I love the fight scenes and stuff, but, again, it could be better. The cockroach aliens, though, those are really cool, and that's why it's a little bit above. Again, another alien invasion. It's going to keep happening. Brace yourself. Godzilla vs. Megalon is a movie that I've barely seen. I have seen it all the way through, but when I was little, I barely watched this because I could hardly find a copy of it. The only copies I could find were like VHS rips, but that being said, this is D tier. Jet Jaguar is awesome and is like the only redeeming factor of this entire movie. Everything else is just hot garbage. There's the cool Godzilla tail slam thing that he does, and that's awesome. Godzilla vs. Megalon is just a mess. Jet Jaguar is awesome. I barely remember it, if I'm being honest. I remember Mystery Science Theater 3000 ripping on it, and frankly, it's deserved. It's not that great of a movie. However, it gets a lot better from here. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is very solid. It's B tier. King Caesar is really cool. I love the design of this monster. Mechagodzilla looks great. I don't even want to ruin it, but like it's kind of a thing, like people know it, where it's fake. It's in the Godzilla suit at the beginning, and then it's like a Terminator almost. And that's really cool. The shot of the two Godzillas staring each other down. Kind of an unsatisfactory send-off, though, for Anguirus, if I'm being honest. But still, really cool movie. I enjoy it. The Caesar song, though, is kind of dumb, and it goes on for way too long. But still, it's entertaining. Terror of Mechagodzilla. This is A tier. This is seriously a great send-off for the Showa series. And honestly, if it wasn't for these last two, then I probably wouldn't even like Godzilla as much as I do. Terror of Mechagodzilla is so cool. Titanosaurus. Everyone rips on his roar. I love it. It sounds like a trumpet. It is so cool when Godzilla first shows up, when Titanosaurus is like destroying a city, and you just get that slow Godzilla theme, that da-na-na, da-na-na. It's, and like he's like covered in like smoke and you just see his silhouette. It's one of the most badass openings, or really Godzilla entrances for a series. You know, it's so awesome. The redesign of Mechagodzilla, if you can even call it that, they really just added like a MG2 patch to his arm. It's whatever, but it's still cool. And the fact that I don't want to ruin it, but the fact that they, let's just say, figured out how to stop him from dying, because Mechagodzilla died a specific way in the last movie, and it's cool that Godzilla tried that same thing again, and it does not work this time. That's all I'm going to say. It's really neat. Very entertaining movie, though. So that's the end of the Showa era. Really quick, I'll just kind of say my thoughts on the Showa era of Godzilla. This was always my favorite growing up. This is what I was raised on. My local library, only really had these movies, and so that's all I really watched. So I still love the Heisei era ones and the Millennium ones, kinda, but you know, for me it just goes Showa, Heisei, Millennium, and Reiwa's still going, so I'm not going to say anything definitive about the Reiwa period. So moving on, Return of Godzilla. It's C tier. It's a standard Godzilla movie where he just destroys buildings and stuff, which I know I said with Mothra vs. Godzilla that I would have wanted that, but with this, Godzilla just feels stiff. They used an animatronic for some of the scenes, and you could just tell that it's an animatronic. It's not a guy in a suit, because it just kind of moves like this, and it doesn't look all that great. You know, the King Kong Dino De Laurentiis remake from the 70s with Jeff Bridges, that used an animatronic, and that also looked horrible, so you can tell they were kind of trying to do something like that, but it doesn't really work. I like the part at the beginning with the giant sea lice on the boat. It's just really freaky with all the dead bodies and stuff, and it's very atmospheric, and it's a great opening to the movie. It is bizarre, though, with all the different versions of the movie, and it gets confusing, especially when certain scenes were censored by different governments, whether it was the Soviet Union or the American government censoring stuff where the Soviets look good and vice versa, and it's a confusing mess. So just watch the Japanese original. It's decent. They definitely end it in a very interesting way, I'll put it that way. Godzilla vs. Biollante is B tier. Again, it's a step up from Return of Godzilla or Godzilla 1985, whatever you want to call it. I always mix up the two titles. I call it whichever. It's interchangeable for me, even though they're not, but bear with me. Godzilla vs. Biollante is very solid. It's extremely beautiful. The suit design of Biollante is a technological marvel. I've never seen anything look that incredible. It honestly, the effect rivals certain shots from John Carpenter's The Thing. It just looks amazing. And apparently this was written by some guy who wasn't even a screenwriter. It was during like a thing where Toho was like, hey, do you have any ideas for a Godzilla movie? And this guy submitted it and he won. And this was the plot. And it's just really cool to see something like that. But regardless, even despite that, it's still a very well-made Godzilla movie, and it's slowly putting the Heisei period on track to where it needs to be. Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah is pretty good. I like it a lot. It feels very American, though, and that's because the director had a lot of influence from American cinema. So you see a lot of stuff like Back to the Future and Terminator being heavily influenced, almost to the point of it being blatant plagiarism, but I won't go that far. That being said, though, the action scenes, including Godzilla fighting King Ghidorah and eventually Mecha King Ghidorah, are awesome. this era of Godzilla, with the Heisei era specifically, this film, I'd argue, is really where they got it right with the scale of the monsters and the way that they fight. I love the Showa stuff where they're just beating the shit out of each other and they're just throwing stuff around, but this is honestly, in my opinion, a bit more entertaining from a perspective of dramatics. Like they're firing beams at each other, which is a common criticism of the Heisei era, but with this, Mecha King Ghidorah shoots out that chest thing and stabs Godzilla with it, and it's gnarly. It's great, and I love it. So yeah, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah is a pretty great movie in the series, and honestly one of my favorites. The reason it's not S tier is just it feels too American, and it just feels like it doesn't want to be a Godzilla movie, and it wants to be literally anything but. Godzilla vs. Mothra: Battle for Earth. Yeah. Batra's cool, but otherwise it's a huge decline from Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. Again, I don't like Mothra, so that's just me. I just think it's kind of lame how Mothra's just kind of flying there and just beaming Godzilla, and it's not really my thing. I guess moving on. I know there are people who love Mothra, but I'm not one of them. Sorry if I'm disrespecting your favorite, but yeah. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, it's pretty decent. I'd say it's a B tier. The action scenes with Rodan are really cool. The design of Mechagodzilla 2 is kind of weak in my opinion. He looks very dopey, and eventually they'd get the design right. We'll get there when we get there, but I enjoy this. I enjoyed this movie a lot. I think it's interesting how they used tech from Mecha King Ghidorah to create Mechagodzilla. I think that's very interesting, even if it doesn't make too much sense, because I doubt there was that much machinery or metal to really make a Mechagodzilla, but it's whatever. Either way, great flick, and it's the introduction of Godzilla Jr. Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. This is one that I watched a lot as a kid. Mogira is great. I love the design. Huge upgrade from his appearance in the Mysterians. A lot more robotic. I like how it kind of separates and combines into, like a tank or like a jet. And honestly, man, they should have made that a toy. Like, I would have played the shit out of that if that was around when I was a kid. Like, I get it, whatever. It's Japanese and not a lot of American kids at this time really cared about it, but I would have loved this if they made a borderline like Transformer type thing. It would have been really cool. But either way, I do think Space Godzilla is kind of a dumb character, and the only reason why this movie isn't higher up. For some reason, they shoehorned Mothra in. I don't care. So, yeah, I don't know. For me, though, I think that this is a very well-made movie, and I do love the final fight scene with all the crystals around the one building, and it's great stuff. Godzilla vs. Destroya is S tier all the way. The burning Godzilla design is incredible. The way that the steam is constantly just bellowing off of him, and he looks like he's in pain. The design of Destroya is insane. He looks like the devil. It's awesome. But also the larva, I wouldn't say larva, but it's like whatever you'd call it, the aggregate form of Destroya. Is really cool when the soldiers go into the aquarium and try to take it down. It is very cool to see human action happening in a Godzilla movie because it kind of breaks up the pace a bit, and it's like a palate cleanser, from all the monster fighting. So it's really neat, and I love it a lot. Some parts remind me of Alien, like when the one woman is in the car and the second mouth comes out, and that's I feel like as far as it should go with referencing American cinema, because Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah took it way too far, whereas Godzilla vs. Destroya did it perfectly, in my opinion. The ending is very depressing. A lot of childhood trauma there, but it's still cool. It's somewhat of a positive ending if you know what happens. I'm not going to ruin it. Must watch, definitely. Godzilla 98. You know this is coming. It's F tier. I'm sorry. In recent years, it's been kind of like an edgy take to say, oh, I liked Godzilla 98. No, you don't. No one likes Godzilla 1998. I'm sorry. No one likes this movie. If you say you do, you're lying to yourself. This movie is horrible. It is peak Roland Emmerich being a terrible filmmaker. I don't want to get into this any more than I have to, but this very much just seems like Roland Emmerich hating Godzilla, not wanting to make a Godzilla movie, and just wanting to do his own thing while using the Godzilla brand. He blatantly rips off Jurassic Park throughout most of the movie, throughout like that third act with all the baby Zillas, and it just makes me angry thinking about it. That being said, if there is any redeeming quality of this, it is the opening credits with the stock footage, and like it's like this yellow orange sort of sepia or whatever, and seeing the iguanas and stuff. It's pretty cool, and it reels you in, even if the movie's horrible. It at least I'll sit back and I'll kind of watch that opening title sequence and kind of be like, this is cool. Godzilla 2000, it's pretty good. It was sort of a back to basics in a way, because Toho was so disgusted with 1998 that they just went, okay, we got to make this right. The brand would have been tarnished had they not. I am so glad that they didn't make a trilogy of 1998 Godzilla, because that would have been horrible. I read part of the script, and apparently he would have been in Africa fighting a giant bug monster called Queen Bitch, and it's just it makes me angry. But anyways, Godzilla 2000, it's a breath of fresh air. There are some really bad CG shots, and there's one green screen shot that was in a lot of like the DVD commercials for this movie. That's really bad, where it's a helicopter kind of flying, and then you see Godzilla walking in the background, and it looks really bad. Orga's really cool. It's definitely a unique design that Clash of the Titans from 2011 totally ripped off. I do like the like squishy jellyfish looking form of Orga at first. I think that's really cool. And honestly, I wish they kind of did more with that. It would have been interesting to see a little bit more of that Orga form, but still, I get it. It's also really cool how Orga tries to eat Godzilla, and he starts to sort of morph into him. I just think that's such an interesting concept for a monster. Going back to The Thing, it's really reminiscent of that. And I honestly would have liked to have seen that explored more. Like, what if he successfully made himself this Orga Godzilla amalgamation? Like you already saw the spines growing. It's like I wanted to see more, but still. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is not the best. The action is just sort of lame, especially when that whole, tail in the mouth part happens and he bites off the tail. It's dumb. It is interesting, though, to see the military try to kill Godzilla with a black hole and still fail. In fact, catastrophically. I think that's hilarious. But that being said, it's not that, it's okay. It's not the best, but still. It is interesting that it's in a different continuity than Godzilla 2000, despite the suits being very similar. I've always thought that they were sequels, and it was only like a few years ago when I learned that they weren't. Which, I don't know why they didn't just make them sequels. I mean, it kind of works. Not like continuity really matters here. I mean, have you seen the timeline for this franchise? It's ridiculous. It's nuts. So, yeah. I am excited to talk about this one. Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, giant monsters all out attack. This one, S tier all the way. I'd go, this is up there with Godzilla versus Hedorah. Like, this movie, this one's nuts. They got the guy that did the Heisei Gamera movies to make this, and it's great. Like, this is really good. I wish this guy made way more Godzilla movies. They should have given this guy a whole trilogy. He clearly has a lot of love and respect towards these characters, and he shows it in kind of a weird way, because Ghidorah is totally nerfed in this, and this is also my favorite depiction of Mothra. I love how she's not this stupid fuzzball. I like how she looks like an actual moth for once. I also like that Baragon actually has a time to shine. It's also really cool that this is one of the first female suit actors in Godzilla. I just think that this movie is seriously one of the best. It brought back Godzilla as this force of nature. He's blind with rage, and the way that they film the movie is great too. A lot of low angles, a lot of shots from within buildings, which is very unique for the series. And they do not hold back. People die in this movie, and it's pretty gruesome, and I love it. Again, there's some CGI that's a bit rough, and making King Ghidorah a good guy is a bit weird to me. Again, though, creative liberties. I still respect it, though. One of the best. Seriously, S tier. I mean, it's nitpicking. Don't get me wrong. Like, that's such a minor flaw. But Godzilla against Mechagodzilla is a bit strange, as it's fine. It's one of the best suit designs for Mechagodzilla, for sure. However, it feels incomplete, and that's because it's part one of a duology, the Kiryu duology, or the Kiryu saga. I don't know what people call it. I prefer to call it just the duology. Even though technically, like, Godzilla 54 is canon and Mothra 61 is canon, and even I think War of the Gargantuas are canon within this like continuity. It's bizarre. This one always felt weaker to me in terms of plot and storyline, and I just wasn't really all that invested in the character as opposed to Tokyo SOS. I think it's interesting though how they built Mechagodzilla around the skeleton of the original one from 1954, like the original Godzilla, and how it takes control is very interesting to watch. I think that the filmmakers clearly took a fairly big risk in altering the origins of Mechagodzilla, and they sort of find a healthy middle ground in both the design and the way that the monster acts. Whereas before, he was a alien invader, he was a tool for destruction. He was then, in the Heisei era, rebooted to be rebooted is the wrong word. I mean, I guess they brought him back, it's a new iteration of the character as a defense, to help protect humanity. And now he's kind of a little bit of both. He's a bad guy, he's a good guy. He's a bad guy when the original Godzilla takes control. And it's kind of cool. It's like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type way of looking at it. But yeah, overall, great movie. Maybe not great. It's good. It's okay. It's fine. Could be better. Oh, wait, it did get better. Tokyo SOS. This one, this movie's awesome. I like this one. Too bad Mothra's in it. I'm kidding. Mothra is really good in this for once. I enjoy this one a lot. It wraps stuff up nicely from Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. I like how Godzilla has scars on his chest, and I just like the general upgrades that they gave Kiryu. This one is such a huge step up, and maybe I'm just a sucker because it's the finale, so everything feels more complete. But I just dig it. I like how they brought back he's now a grandpa, but the protagonist from Mothra 1961. I just think it's cool that they kind of show respect to the old original films. It's really neat. Godzilla Final Wars. Oh, S tier. I'm sorry. People hate this movie. You're objectively wrong. Like, I'm sorry. This movie rips off The Matrix, and like, it's amazing. I'm sorry. This movie's great. I can quote this whole movie almost word for word. Don Fry, so good. He's so good in this. He's a wrestler. Can't act, but doesn't matter. He's so awesome in this. They brought back like the Gotengo from Atragon, which is really cool. They brought back a ton of the monsters too from like past films, and it's awesome. Ebra gets completely fried by a bunch of humans, or really mutants, and it's so cool. My only gripes, they're not even gripes, they're just minor nitpicks. I wish that Hedra was in it for longer, but that's just because I love Hedra. I also would have liked to have seen more monsters. I know, like, it's asking a lot because, like, almost every monster known to man is in this movie, but, like, it would have been cool to see, like, the Gargantuas show up or something. It's like, you just reuse a set. I don't care. Have them fight in the water, something. I don't care. Just have some of these classic monsters show up. It would have been really cool. Final Wars, though, awesome movie. Awesome movie. Like, I watch this movie and I just want to stand up and cheer when it ends. It's so good. I don't mean that in like a bad way. I mean that in like a good way. The music's decent though. I'd say, again, it's a nitpick, but like the music could be a lot better. I wish that they used the Godzilla theme more though. That's my only kind of thing. Otherwise though, the music's great in terms of like the motorcycle battle theme. Like that. So I don't know. I love it. It's seriously one of the best. Monster X is such a cool villain. Great movie. Godzilla 2014. I'd say it's A tier. It gets a lot of shit, but mainly because of the lack of screen time that Godzilla has. But if we're being honest here, typical for like the Showa era films for him to only have like 10 minutes of screen time, because a lot of it's very human oriented, even if the human stuff is boring as shit. That being said, I enjoy this movie a lot. I saw this like the day before it came out in theaters. I saw it. I got like advanced screening when I was like in 5th grade. I was so happy. This movie's fantastic. It's I love it. I still go back and rewatch it. It's not an S tier because they killed off Bryan Cranston, and my copy of the Blu-ray is trash. I can't see anything. I'm gonna pick up the new one that came out where they fix that problem eventually. It's like low priority right now though. But yeah, overall though, I like this movie. It's pretty great. Shin Godzilla, or for some reason in the States, it was called Godzilla Resurgence. S tier. I love this movie. I saw this in theaters and I thought it was nuts. I was not expecting anything like this. I don't even want to ruin it for people. It won Best Picture at the Japanese Oscars, and it's well deserved. I'm not going to ruin this, so just go see it. Go watch it. It's great. Watch it with subtitles though. Don't watch it with dubbing, you fucking heathen. Okay. The anime trilogy, they're all D. You know what? Mechagodzilla City is fucking F tier. That movie sucks. I really don't want to talk about these movies because they're really bad. I just feel like they just didn't really care about the lore of Godzilla. And I get they try to do their own thing, but even then it just feels bad. Like, I remember being hyped that they were bringing back Orga and Kamacuras and just obscure monsters like that. But they were like in a news clip for about 2 seconds, if even. It was like right at the beginning, and then the rest of it was just a bunch of schmucks just on like hovercrafts on Earth, and it was just really bad. I didn't like it at all. It wasn't that great. City on the Edge of Battle, or whatever it's called, was just horrible. They hype up Mechagodzilla. I mean, he's in the poster and he's not even in the movie. It's not a good movie. I don't care about that one. Planet Eater's kind of cool. I do appreciate it for what it tried to do. I like the depiction of Ghidorah, which I know it's kind of a hot take, and I do like the cosmic, like H.P. Lovecraft type way of depicting it, but not great at all. Not hardly even good. And I'm not really an anime person myself, but I can still appreciate good art in terms of drawing styles and stuff, and these don't have that. These are ugly. They hurt to look at times, which Singular Point looks very good. Like, I watched like a little bit of the first episode, and I'm going to save it for another day when I can just watch it all in one go, but I love the art style in Singular Point. The anime trilogy, not so much. King of the Monsters, it's up there for sure with 2014. I think they're about on par with each other for different reasons. The 2014 film, it's very much character driven, and the monsters aren't necessarily like the biggest part of the movie, you know? Whereas, 2014 feels a lot like the original Godzilla, and I feel like that was the intention. Whereas King of the Monsters is essentially just a remake of Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, but better. And that goes just beyond them having the same monsters. It just feels almost like compensation for the last movie not having that many monsters, so they just go, here's 17 original ones. But let's be real, Behemoth is the only cool one, because he's a woolly mammoth with fists, and that's cool. But yeah, I don't know. It's good. It's definitely great. I love the depiction of Ghidorah. I think he's really cool. I like how the heads have different personalities. I think the director, Mike Doherty, we'll call him Mike D. Mike D is very clearly a Godzilla fan. Watching interviews, and Gareth Edwards is too, don't get me wrong. I'm just talking about Mike D here for a bit. He's very clearly a Godzilla fan. You can just tell by how passionate he is about this stuff, and with how much he just loves the franchise. And it's honestly palpable at times. Like, it's like I get excited hearing him talk about this stuff, and it's honestly, it's great stuff. It's very much a love letter to the like early 60s Showa era, right? That's kind of the way that I perceive it. Whereas Godzilla vs. Kong is a love letter to like the early 70s like Godzilla versus Megalon type attitude. And for me, it's B tier. It would be higher up. I loved this when I first saw it, but the more and more I rewatch it, I just kind of zone out, and I'm like, okay, this is not the best. It just feels like an amusement park at times, and I'm just kind of zoning out, which I get it. It's Godzilla, right? This isn't some art film, but still, I don't know. I think it's still well made. It's just typical Hollywood blockbuster stuff, but it is cool to see it be remade, even if it is pretty much on the same tier as the original for me. In fact, it is on the same tier. That's where we're going to end it. Now, I will say this. I normally don't do videos like these where it's improvised. I normally have a script in front of me, but I might make more of these, preferably when I'm not tired, because I've been up since 2 a.m. That being said, I am working on a Ultimate Godzilla retrospective where I talk about each and every one of these films, including the TV shows, including even like the Charles Barkley Nike commercial, right? I'm talking about everything. And it will be 15 hours long, if not longer. I am really writing about every aspect of the movie and everything I love about this. I am a huge Godzilla fan, and so being able to make this retrospective and talk about this is something I'm so excited for, and I hope you guys stay tuned for that. It likely won't be out until late this year or even next year, but it's going to be a huge project. I'm not going to break it up into Showa, Heisei, Millennium, Reiwa. I'm just going to put it all in one go because I don't want to flood your sub feeds. And it's not about the views. You know, I could easily get views breaking them up into pieces, but that's not the point. So let me know what you thought down below in the comments. I would love to hear your opinions. I am aware that a lot of my takes on this franchise may not really be by the numbers, but still, I would love to have a healthy discussion down below in the comments. So let me know. Like the video, subscribe. I normally don't ask people to subscribe, but why not? I figured I'd ask just this time. So, yeah, thanks for watching. I'm going to go get some sleep. Peace out.